billionaire and entrepreneur Tom Steyer is running for President of the United States. Today, his son, Sam Steyer, came to the Lowcountry to talk to constituents about his father's vision for the country. I sit down exclusively with Sam for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview Friday on iHeartRadio. Sam Steyer, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Quintin.
Oh, you're welcome. Obviously, you're Tom Steyer's son, the billionaire who's running for President of the United States. And obviously, you have your own success. Besides being Tom Steyer's son, who else is Sam Steyer?
Yeah, well, so I'm from San Francisco, California.
Yes.
I have 3 younger siblings I'm very close with to this day. And I grew up very passionate about math and engineering. I studied applied math in undergrad and then in my master's. And I also was always very into the outdoors and sports and the natural world and the environment. And so after I finished my graduate degree, I went and worked in clean energy in San Francisco as a software engineer, working at a startup that was basically trying to make it easier for companies building clean energy projects to get all the data that they need to build those projects. So, I'm a Californian, an environmentalist. I'm really into math and engineering, but now I really believed in my dad's run for president, and so I left my job to join the campaign full time. So I am now working full time on the campaign.
Wow! And as a matter of fact, you talk about the campaign. I know that you wrote an op-ed to the Quad City Times just recently on December 6th, 2019, and the headline reads this: "Column: Leaders are idealistic and pragmatic." This is, as you mentioned, the op-ed in the Quad City Times newspaper on December 6, 2019. Leaders are idealistic and pragmatic. What else would you add to that headline right now?
So I really believe in what I said in that headline. And I think if I was going to, write a second chapter of that op-ed, I would focus on Beneficial State Bank. And what Beneficial State Bank is a bank on the West Coast, or at least for now, that my parents co-founded together. That was basically built around the thesis that there were people originally in Oakland and then in many cities on the West Coast who had the potential to start great businesses and would benefit from having access to basically normal banking services in their lives, credit for just the basic stuff of life, who were being excluded from the banking system and who were being funneled into systems like check cashing and payday lending that are predatory. And my parents built Beneficial State Bank together over the last, since 2005, so 15 years. And they hired a large, awesome team that reflected and looked like Oakland. So a diverse team, a young entrepreneurial team, and I'm happy to say that Beneficial's been very successful in funding businesses that have succeeded in Oakland and Portland and Fresno and parts of California that have been overlooked by traditional capital. And the reason I would write about that is I think it embodies what my parents are about, which is they have high-minded ideals, like that everyone should have an equal shot, that there is talent and creativity that's being overlooked in this country in a way that's not right. But they had a very practical way of going about it. They started a bank, they got it chartered by the bank regulators, they raised capital, they had a bunch of sort of nuts and bolts stuff to make it happen.
And let me break a part of the column down for you. You wrote this also too, quote, "Growing up, my parents, Tom Steyer and Kat Taylor, modeled a kind of leadership that I always admired." What leadership does your father model to this day?
Yeah, so I think the kind of leader that my dad is so he's someone who combines an ability to be very idealistic about the future and about the way the world should be, with the ability to see the world today as it is in its imperfections and the uglier sides of it. And I think there's so many examples of that. But one that comes to mind is that he stood up for impeachment very early in the Trump presidency. He didn't pretend that President Trump wasn't doing things that were dangerous and scary as president. And I think another is the organization that he started, Next Gen America, which is a very progressive organization that's focused on ensuring basic rights like a living wage and clean air and water for Americans. But they go about it very practically by increasing voter turnout in targeted congressional races, focusing on the most powerful state ballot initiatives. They're very their goals are high-minded, but their methods are very practical and deal with the world as it is today.
And you also said this too in the column quote. They combine the idealism, that is, to choose big causes they believe in with the daily discipline to make progress. What is your father's idealism right now in 2020?
Yeah, so in the 2020 election, I would say that my father's idealism is codified in what we call the 5 rights. And that's basically the idea that in the 21st century, there are things that we should and can guarantee as rights for every American. And those are a living wage. Unemployment is actually fairly low right now, but many people are having to work 2 and 3 jobs to support their families, that everyone should be able to work 1 job and support a family. Clean air and water. It's not right that Americans should be made sick by the water they drink or the air they breathe. Affordable health care with universal coverage. Access to high-quality public education for pre-K through college or whatever, vocational school or whatever people want to do after high school. I don't think there's, the idea that we can't afford that, I think we can't afford not to do that. There's no better investment than investing in the education of the American people. And then the unmitigated right to vote. We believe that in some states, gerrymandering or striking people from the rolls or other sorts of voter suppression are creating a democracy that isn't living up to our highest ideals of 1 person, 1 vote, full representation, and we believe that is the purview of the federal government. So, I think all of those are idealistic goals but are also, things that the next president can accomplish.
As a matter of fact, you said this quote, Donald Trump is going to base his re-election argument on the economy. What argument will your dad take to the American people about the economy?
Yeah, so I think that Donald Trump in his re-election campaign is really going to make a 2-part argument. The first is going to be, you may not like me personally, but I'm a businessman, and so I understand the economy. And the second part is going to be, I've built a really strong economy in my first term because I'm a businessman, and if you want that to keep going, you need to re-elect me for a second term. And I think that my dad is really well positioned to tell the truth and make a counter argument, which is, first, the type of businessman that President Trump is not something the business community should be proud of. We believe he had a business career that was marked by broken relationships and debt and bankruptcy and a zero-sum game view of the world, that the way I get ahead is by taking something away from you. And that the economy he's built has actually been built around things that reflect those values. The 2017 tax cuts were a massive giveaway to the richest people in society, didn't do very much for anyone else. He's picked a trade war with our most important trading partners based on his own ego and based on this conception that we need to take something away from someone else to get ahead. And he hasn't focused on the core issues of living wage, access to education, access to healthcare that matter for the ways that the economy matters for most people. So, we believe that my dad, because he really did build his own business from scratch, has a lot of credibility to make that argument. And because, for 3 decades, his job was understanding the global economy, can describe in detail the things that we think are wrong with the economy that President Trump has built, and can steward an economy that's prosperous, but prosperous for everyone.
And let me deviate from the column for just a second. You just talked about the wealthy. Obviously, wealth taxes have been tried in Europe, and reportedly it didn't work. Your father was a wealth tax supporter.
Yeah.
What's the biggest difference between the experiments in Europe and, say, proposals such as Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders?
That's a great question, Quintin. I guess I want to first say, I want to not pretend to be more of a policy expert than I am. I'm not knowledgeable in detail.
Okay.
There are people on our team who are, but I'm not, about what how the wealth taxes in Europe were structured and why they didn't live up to expectations. I will say two things. One, I think we are dealing with a level of inequality in the country right now that is out of the ordinary. That is both harmful to people who are trying to survive on wages that are too low, and harmful to sort of the fabric of society. And so I think it's not just, we're not doing this in a vacuum, we're doing this in the face of inequality that's too high in the country. And I think the other thing is it's an incredible privilege and just awesome part of life to be an American. And I think a lot of people, including wealthy people, feel that. So I think one of the arguments that's made against a wealth tax is that wealthy people will leave or take their money overseas. I think for the most part, it's invaluable to get to be an American and live in the United States, and I don't think people are going to leave.
In your mind, is there an expected cost of the bureaucracy some say may be needed to administer this?
To administer the wealth tax?
Yes, sir.
Again, I would say I don't want to pretend to be more of a policy expert than I am. Of course, there will be some cost of administering part of the tax code, like there is costs of other parts of the federal government. That being said, if you look at a pie chart of the cost basis of the federal government, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the military collectively make up, 70 or 80% or something. So I think that it's true there will be some cost to administering the wealth tax. I haven't seen anything that says that the cost of administering it will be a meaningful portion of the federal budget or will change the budget deficit calculus or anything. But yeah, of course, anything that the government is doing has some cost of hiring people to administer it. But to me, that had never been raised to me before as one of the main pros or cons of having a wealth tax.
Let me get back to your article because you wrote this too. He, meaning obviously your father, he will, Donald Trump, that is, he will try to connect his background as a businessman to the current low unemployment numbers. What are the unemployment numbers right now in South Carolina?
I don't know. Do you know? I know what they are nationally, but I don't know specifically what they are in South Carolina.
Oh, what are those? Oh, I can go to the next question.
No, I was wondering, do you know what it is right now in South Carolina?
Oh, no, I wanted to see if you...
I don't know.
Okay. And you also said this too, quote, in your column, Trump's hope is that we will look past the crimes, chaos, prejudice, and discrimination, that is, of his first term and vote for a CEO who claims to deliver prosperity.
Yeah.
What crimes, chaos, prejudice, and discrimination have you seen in President Donald Trump's first term in your mind?
Yeah, so in my mind, I think that in terms of discrimination, he has advocated for several policies that I think are basically aimed at drumming up fear in white Americans against people of color. And to me specifically, that is the Muslim ban and the wall. In terms of crimes, I think that the current impeachment process is a perfect referendum on things that I believe are crimes that he's done, that he's committed. I think that the quid pro quo with Ukraine and the investigation of the Bidens is the most obvious one. My dad has also read every page of the Mueller report and believes that President Trump committed obstruction of justice.
And what is the state of prosperity in 2020 in your mind?
In the United States?
Yes, sir.
In my mind, the United States has by far the world's strongest economy, by far the world's best university system, by far the world's most important technology companies, but it has a unfair and harmful distribution of wealth. So I think the American economy is very strong in terms of what it produces and in terms of being on the cutting edge of creation of knowledge and intellectual property. But I think we have a higher Gini coefficient, basically measure of how unequally wealth is distributed in society, than I think any other industrialized nation other than maybe Brazil.
Okay.
We have, I think, 37,000 homeless veterans in this country. We have a massive homelessness crisis. where I live in California, we have a huge underfunding of public schools where the school system in South Carolina has lost 6,000 public school teachers last year, some of whom went to work in retail because they couldn't afford to live on the wages of a public school teacher anymore. And in my view, they're doing, maybe the most important job you could do, educating American children. We have people who can't afford to have health insurance. So my view of the economy is the overall productivity of the economy is high, and the United States is still the leader of the world. But the way that we're distributing wealth is unfair and means that Americans are not having access to the basic stuff of life: housing, education, a living wage, medical care, and that's unnecessary and unacceptable.
I know your father talks a lot about Medicaid and obviously healthcare and other issues.
Yeah.
Where is his comprehensive plan when it comes to homelessness?
Yeah, so he has put out a comprehensive affordable housing plan, and it's on our website, but the key components of it are federal funding to build more affordable housing, programs to try to end veterans' homelessness, a mix of addressing the housing crisis and the climate crisis together by calling for all new residential construction to be net zero by 2030 and to retrofit all housing to be net zero. Basically, net zero meaning not to emit more carbon than is sequestered by planting trees or something by 2045, and also increased rights for renters. Because for homeowners, a large part of the way that Americans save and build wealth is by owning their home and paying off their mortgage, which is great. But in many urban areas, increasingly people rent, don't own, and so they don't have that way of building equity for their family. And so there's also a plan around how to make it easier for renters to stay in the same place and easier for renters to save.
And let me get back to the rest of our column. You said this quote: "The best way for us Democrats to break down that argument is to have someone who can go toe-to-toe on all of Trump's points and prove them wrong. Someone who provides a clear contrast. My dad is the best candidate to do that." How clear is that contrast with your father right now?
So I think it's very clear. I think anyone who comes and hears my dad speak in an event or meets my dad or knew my dad before the campaign sees that other than both coming from the private sector, he has nothing in common with Donald Trump. My dad is humble. My dad draws a Jerusalem cross on his left hand every day to remind him of his Episcopalian faith and to remind him to always tell the truth. My dad started his business by himself in a single room with no family help. His first two partners in the business were women, and today one of them is my younger sister's godmother, and the other one is one of our good family friends and has been helping us out in preparing for the debates by playing other candidates. And my point is, they were very successful in business, but they were successful by treating each other with respect and honesty and building long-term partnerships, and living their values. And I would say, lastly, my dad has been interested or passionate about democratic politics and social justice for his whole life. He helped out on the Mondale campaign in 1984. He started a regenerative agriculture farm and ranch with my mom in 2001, and then the bank in 2005. He has been oriented towards social justice and oriented towards public service his whole life. And he built his business in a totally meritocratic and collaborative way. And I think, all of those things are strong contrast to Donald Trump and chip away at the core argument that Donald Trump is going to make for re-election.
Are there any other solutions besides impeachment in your mind?
Other solutions to what? We've asked that question a different way.
Yeah, instead of as many people saying that this president needs to be impeached, are there any other solutions besides impeaching him?
Yes, definitely. We need to, whoever the Democratic nominee is, we have to win the 2020 election. And that is going to come down to organizing and turnout. There are more Democrats and more people who see this election the way we do across Democrats, Independents, and Republicans than there are Republicans. It's a matter of organizing and turnout. President Trump has already been impeached. It's a question, I guess, if he's convicted and removed in the Senate, which I think most people agree is very unlikely. But I think the main question that's up in the air in the Senate is, will there be a real trial where the American people can hear from witnesses and see what happened? And we believe that's the right thing to do. But we're definitely not relying on the Senate to convict Donald Trump as the way that we, inaugurate a new president. We believe everything comes down to the 2020 presidential election. And, I strongly believe that my dad should be the nominee, but I also will support, and my dad will support with everything we have, whoever the Democratic nominee is, because it's a strong field and any of them would be a better president than Donald Trump. And then lastly, and sorry, this is more than you asked.
Oh, no, go for it.
We believe it's really important to win at all levels of government. There's a lot more the new president can do if there's a Democratic majority in the Senate. There's a lot more that the new president can do if the states are supportive of his or her agenda. And we have governors and state legislatures that are supportive. And so, I would say the core thing that we believe in is organizing and turning out progressive voters and young people in 2020. And that'll allow the Democrats to win the presidency, but it'll also allow the Democrats to win many other elections, which are also very important.
Let me turn back to the economy. You said this in the column quote. So to the voters who voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Trump because they wanted an outsider who can grow the economy, I hope you'll take a closer look at Tom Steyer. Question: how much did President Obama grew the economy before President Trump's first term, in your mind?
Just to make sure I understand the question, Quintin, the question is, how much did President Obama grow the economy over the 8 years of presidency?
Before President Trump took over.
Yeah, got it. So my personal view is that President Obama was a terrific president, and I think that he doesn't get enough credit for inheriting a financial crisis that was absolutely devastating to everyday Americans' lives, and that was causing people to lose their homes, lose their jobs, and be in really dire straits. And I think that through Obama's steady hand and thoughtful management of the stimulus and thoughtful, judicious foreign policy, he stabilized the economy, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit for that. And then I think, but at the same time, I think the Obama presidency corresponds with the rise of the Koch brothers and the sort of broader libertarian-leaning Republican dark money efforts, which were able to essentially win a bunch of state legislatures and take back the House for the Republicans for a time. And so during the Obama presidency, there actually were a lot of states that implemented basically the ALEC suite of policies, the essentially Republican state policies that cut taxes as much as possible, cut education, and cut medical care. And so I think that I don't feel that when Trump, going into the 2016 election, that the economy was working for many Americans. I think that there were people who were feeling really left out and not able to find a job that was paying a living wage and having a hard time accessing medical care or accessing a high quality education for their children. And I think there was totally legitimate fear and anger about that. But I don't blame President Obama for that. I think President Obama was a terrific president, and I think that if there was something really bad going on at the same time of his presidency, which was this huge rise in libertarian dark money and this huge sort of Tea Party-oriented attack on the government, and that I think had a lot of negative effects on people's lives. But I think Obama was a terrific president.
And I know this column is huge, but I know you got to run, and I have to run, and the battery's running low. But let me go to the last part, paragraph of your column. It reads this: as Democrats, we shouldn't accept the false Republican frame that we were the idealists and that they're pragmatists who can grow the economy. My parents showed me from a young age that the best leaders are both. How can your father be both in 2020?
Yeah, so I think he's doing it right now. I think this is a argument that the Republicans will try to use against the Democrats. That it's sort of like, how are we going to pay for all that? This is too crazy argument. And I think the ways to counter that are first, to reassert what's true, which is it's not crazy or unrealistic to expect that we're going to provide every American the basic things to have a healthy, happy life. We are the wealthiest, most powerful country in the world, and I think it's well within our reach to do that. And we have to keep reminding people that that's what we're talking about. And then I think the other thing is, I think that my dad is a terrific person to talk about these things on economic terms and explain how we are going to pay for them, how the economy is going to thrive under an administration that's prioritizing education and investment in people, and that's tackling the climate crisis, which we have to do, but also is a massive economic opportunity. And so I think that part of it is just staying on message that these are things that Americans deserve and that we should provide for them. And part of it is not being afraid to refute the Republican arguments in the language of economics and business, or to make our arguments in the language of economics and business, because we can do this, and we owe it to each other.
One last question. What's your father's argument for why people should vote for him based off of the need to impeach ads and other ads?
Just to make sure I understand your question, what's the core argument behind all the TV ads?
And the need to impeach ads.
And the need to impeach ads. So the need to impeach ads actually are not arguing that people should vote for my father. Need to Impeach is a separate organization. My dad founded it and ran it, and then when he decided to run for president, he stepped down. And they continued to operate, but they're a separate organization. And the core argument of the need to impeach ads, I guess, is really in the name, was that the Congress should impeach President Trump. The core argument behind my dad's presidential campaign ads is really that the right way to think about the problems we face as a country is that it's gotten too easy for corporate lobbies to influence federal policy and write their own laws and regulations. And so when you see something that doesn't make sense and that's broadly unpopular with Americans, like, for example, paying much more for pharmaceuticals than other industrialized nations do, that you can track that to lobbying and an industry that's gotten too much control over government, and that we need to change some things about the structure of lawmaking to make that not possible. And then the second core argument is climate change is really one example of that. Fossil fuel companies writing their own policy, but it is a crisis at this point, and we need to deal with it immediately. And it's a massive opportunity for economic growth and job creation and international leadership, and we need to capitalize on it immediately.
Sam Steyer, thank you so much for your time. And go ahead.
I didn't get a chance to say it, but I wanted to congratulate you on. Everyone on our team has been telling me that your work has been a huge success on YouTube, and
Thank you.
done over 400 interviews, and they've been really impressed. So I wanted to congratulate you on your success, and thank you so much for spending your time with me.
Thank you greatly, and welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Glad to be here.
Well, thank you greatly. Yeah.